Welcome to episode 3 of the Garden Like a Guru show, and we're excited to have you back with us. I'm your host, Tyhson Banighen, a permaculture instructor, and we have Sarah Bradshaw, the one and only garden guru herself. We have an exciting show for you today. We're talking about astrological influences. We're talking about getting ready to do your little pot setup, and we're going to be talking about all those sorts of things and getting ready to get your seeds up and running. So, Sarah, to start us off, what's up this week?
All right. Well, we've moves past that into that second quarter, so we now have what we call a gibbous moon, which means not full, but not a crescent either. That's that swelling or waning, bulging moon. So we've got a gibbous moon going on right now, and today and tomorrow we're in Cancer. So being in the second quarter, so we're before the full of the moon, we're in Cancer. This is fabulous planting energy. This is a absolutely stellar time to get those seeds into some soil and get those baby plants up and running. We're going to be in Cancer all of today and sliding into tomorrow. Late in the day tomorrow, the moon's going to go void, of course. Now, it'll still be in Cancer, so if you're working on those planting things, if you're working on those activities, just keep right on going because that energy will carry you through on a void, of course. Void, of course, isn't good for starting things, but it works just fine for coming into a nice gliding finish on things. And it's not going to do that until 8:53, almost 9 p.m. tomorrow night. So unless you're a real night owl, chances are right good that you're going to be finished your planting and that and around before that time anyway. So when we go into Wednesday, we're going into Wednesday with a void, of course, moon, but it very rapidly, before most of us are going to be awake at 4:22 in the morning, it's going to slide into Leo. Now, once it slides into Leo, we got an energy change here because Leo is a fire sign. And so you're not going to find planting energy is going to work well with a fire sign. Excuse me. But it is a really good time to make sure that anything that you've already planted has plenty of water. Keep an eye on that kind of stuff. And it's also an excellent time for those things that you've planted for you to be conscious of their growth and to make sure that they're getting plenty of light so that they develop good stem growth as they come up out of there. A little later into the year, that fire sign is just fabulous for cultivating and weed destruction. So if you've got house plants and you're looking at, any kind of bugs on them, or you're concerned about any of the things that might be needing pruning or that, this is actually a really good time to do that. And because the days are getting longer, a lot of your house plants that go into dormancy will be coming out of that dormancy and looking forward to new growth. So get that old growth off of them. Give them a little bit of a spruce up if you need to. Turf up the soil around their roots. Make sure that they can get the water that you're putting on them. By Friday, that moon's going to slide into a short void, of course, period on Friday afternoon into the evening. It's going to start at about 3:30, and then around 9 o'clock, a few minutes after 9, it's going to slide into Virgo. Now, Virgo's Earth. So again, we're good. We're coming back into good planting energy. But on Saturday, when that Virgo energy is, really solid and getting ramped up, we're coming into a full moon. And that full moon happens just minutes after, just minutes after midnight. We're going to be seeing that full moon on Saturday. So that means when you're looking at doing that planting, you're going to be looking at really good root development. You're going to have that solid earth energy and you're going to have that slightly more grounded energy of the earth sign. So, again, things like your onions and bulbs would be really, really good things to get going then. Things that you want that really solid earth energy for. And in regards to that full moon, a lot of times when people are into ceremony, it's a really tough call to know what night you do your full moon or your new moon ceremony on, because it's going new, but it's going to actually go new at 9 o'clock in the morning. And so if you do the ceremony at night, are you out of sync? But if you do it the night before, well, this time we are so blessed on the 27th, because that is the night of the full moon. It goes full right after midnight. That means it makes it very, very easy for you to decide that going into your ceremony Friday evening and carrying it through past the midnight point on Saturday will absolutely ensure that you capture the best of that full moon energy for your ceremonial stuff.
Wow. Thank you for all that. So, just a precautionary note for those that are listening to the show, and welcome to the show, all of you out there that are listening in. Sounds like we have a good crew that's joining us today live. We are talking about Pacific Standard Time. Now, the
Yeah.
beauty of the calendar is that if you get the calendar, or when you get the calendar, because we're encouraging you to do that, then you can figure out how to transcribe all of the dates and times into your local time zone. Once you do it once, then you'll be able to read the calendar and it will be appropriate for your time zone. So just to let you know, that's the best way to do it. And then you can translate from Pacific time into your time zone.
Yeah, and for a great many people, that's going to be just simply adjusting to for an hour. A lot of these kind of astrological almanacs that really pay attention to the moon influences are set in Greenwich Mean Time, or even um, New York Mean Time. So although it, it's set at New York, so it looks like it's in Eastern Standard Time, but the signature is actually set at midnight. So first you have to convert to what the actual time is, then you have to convert for the time zone. Whereas with ours, if you're not in the Pacific Standard Time, it's simply a matter of learning how many hours you add or subtract.
Yeah, really easy peasy lemon squeezy. Once you do it once, you
You're
got
done.
it figured
Yeah.
out. You're done.
Yeah.
And if you really want to go ahead, you can do a week ahead and transcribe everything for that week, and you'll know exactly what's happening in all those different phases and planting times that are appropriate for you. One quick question before we go a little deeper. When's a good time as we come into the spring season to be able to do some transplanting of, say, indoor plants that are a little too leggy and they need to be repotted? When's a good time to do that?
We're coming into that right now. If you look at the wheel of the year and you look at the solstice as the time when the days are at their absolute shortest,
Mm-hmm.
that's when your plants are going to be fully in dormancy, unless it's a Christmas cactus, which blooms at that time of
Right.
year. But the vast majority of your house plants and that are going to be very dormant during that period of time. Once we pass that Imbolc or Groundhog Day, that cross quarter day that is right between the solstice and the equinox, days start really lengthening. And prior to St. Valentine's Day becoming attached to a Catholic saint and ascribed all sorts of romance icons around it, the 14th of February in Northern Europe and Britain was seen as the time when the seeds started to wake up in the ground, the birds started their early migrations, the animals that gave birth late in the winter and early spring usually were giving birth at about that time. So the hares, their babies wouldn't be out and about yet, but they would probably be being born at about that time. So it was kind of the very beginning of that spring type energy, that turn of the wheel
Mm-hmm.
start coming back around again. And that's sort of the energy that you want to capture with your house plants and your indoor stuff. You want to catch that wave of them starting to wake up. So this is a good time to get them out of the darker, the cooler places that you might have tucked them. Start watering them. Don't fertilize them quite yet. They're not ready for that, but do take off any dead growth, any stuff that doesn't look healthy. Give them a good watering. If they're the type of plants that can tolerate it, put them in the shower. You know,
Mm,
hanging your spider plants in a room temperature shower for a while. Your ferns absolutely love it. Most of your hangers will. Even if they don't like direct water on them, they can really benefit from being hung in the bathroom where the shower is running. Get that sort of moisture happening, pore opening energy going on with them. And along about the first part of March, you can probably expect them to really start growing and reviving. And that's when you might want to give them a shot of fertilizer.
okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds great. So that's really helpful. Thank you very much. My house plants are going to love you for all that information.
Yeah, I don't do house plants as much as I did before I had children. That interrupted the house plant rhythm hugely, and by time they were grown and gone, I kind of let gardens and seed saving really consume a lot of my headspace. But there's nothing quite like some green growing stuff in the house to make you feel good.
Yeah, I just love my house plants and I talk to them all the time. So yeah,
Yep.
I like to take care of them. So yeah, thank you for that. So we're going to be talking about getting our little seeds all ready to go, right?
We are indeed. I want to talk a bit about really understanding and working more and more with the astrological influence and paying attention to things in your own zone, in your own era. Like maybe even start recording things like sunrise and sunset in your own particular garden, or if, at the very least, planning to be out in the garden at some point early in the morning and at some point later on into the day so that you're catching the feel of the earth energy around you. And as you're planning your garden, it's really important to pay particular attention to companion planting. And in the course, we're going to have complete workshops on that specifically. And for those of you who sign up for the course, part of what you get is a sheet that outlines what grows really well with what and what it doesn't grow well with, because
Right.
this is equally important. If you've got things that really don't like each other, you need to know that before you plan out your garden. And when you're planting your baby plants, when you're getting them going, that is not too soon to be thinking about companion planting. And it's really only logical. If your basil and your tomatoes are going to love each other in the garden, they're going to get along just fine in a seed tray as well. And some of what goes on in companion planting has to do with root development. There are specific ranges of plants that send out much more root hormone compound as they're developing their roots than do other plants. And you can learn how to really maximize that for yourself. Um, just kind of a general rule of thumb, because this is something that we go into much more detail in the course, but a general rule of thumb is that if a plant can be grown as a cutting, it's going to be a good producer of rooting hormone. So
Hmm.
when you grow that plant from seed, if you grow it beside plants that might have a hard time getting going in the root department, you will really help them. So tomatoes, everybody knows probably that you can cut a chunk off of a tomato, stick it in water, and it will grow roots. Well, that's taking a cutting. That's what taking a cutting from a plant is. And an awful lot of house plants do incredibly well with cuttings. Now, Tyson, you're a house plant fan. When did you learn how to take cuttings from your house for house plants?
When did I learn?
Yeah.
I think anytime that I walk past a plant and I snap it off by mistake, because it's big and bushy, I just basically trim the lower part of it off and stick it in water, and voila, I have roots.
Yeah. And did anybody ever tell you, or did you ever notice that if you stuck two or three in a jar at the same time, they rooted a lot more quickly than when you just stuck one in?
Yeah, and they all intertwine with each other, which makes a nice one big plant, which is nice.
Yeah, yeah. So, anybody who gets into taking cuttings and that starts to notice the phenomenon. I tell people that your plant buddies love to root around together.
Right.
And yeah, and so, when you're actually starting your baby plants, you want to kind of capitalize on this tendency to help each other grow roots. So rather than isolating a little tray and going, this is all my tomato plants, and this is all my onion plants, you're actually going to get a much, much better root development if you actually start letting those plants hang out with each other right at this very beginning germination stage.
So basil and tomatoes, and what are some other ones right off the top?
Onions
Yeah.
are another one that you want to get going. Now, the things that can be really good companions for those are some of the flowers that you want to get going at this time of year because you want them in bloom early in the garden, like your pansies,
Hmm.
your sunflowers, marigolds. Marigolds, by the way, are magic plants. They kick out a ton of rooting hormone. You plant them around the border of a garden bed, and that rooting hormone really helps the other plants grow. But they repel an amazing amount of bugs, but they attract pollinators.
Wow.
So they are these really magical plants. And often I put some marigolds in a tray just more for the fact that they're going to help with the rooting hormone than anything else. I could easily grow my marigolds all in one big tray and take them out to the garden that way. But it actually does my plants a lot of good to break those up and have them in and amongst other things. So learning what plants get along really well with each other can even accelerate the very beginning phases of your garden. And I
Wow.
really encourage people to take advantage of that. And
Yeah.
if you're actually rooting house plants, consider putting them in the same area as you're seeding your vegetables. No, they're not necessarily exchanging the hormones on the sharing the water level, but there is still an exchange of energy amongst the plants that communicate with each other in a whole raft of ways. And the vigor and enthusiasm of a house plant growing its roots to start whole new clones is something that's actually really dynamic for the other plants to feed off of.
Wow. Great, great advice.
Yeah. So last week, Tyson, when we got talking about transplanting and starting our plants indoors, you reminded me of a very ingenious way of saving yourself some money and yet getting the little pots that you need to start your plants in. And I realized afterwards from some of the feedback I got that people didn't 100% understand what I
Mm,
was talking about. So I thought, that it might be fun to show people.
great idea.
Okay, cool. So, the first thing you need is you need some paper. I use newsprint. A lot of people don't realize that newsprint is, because it's not usually glossy, it's very, very quick and easy to break down, and worms really love newsprint. So it's not harmful to your garden. And the vast majority of ink used on newsprint now is vegetable based ink. So if you're using a non glossy flyer, or especially a black and white newspaper, you're going to be using things that are not just benign, but perhaps even benevolent in your garden. So now you can go to Richter's Herbs or a few other places, and they have this thing called the pot maker that they sell you, and it's all done in lovely hardwood, and it's sort of a spool tube thing with a little dish in the bottom that fits in, and you make a pot. But I found out a long time ago from a lovely old gentleman in the Salmon Arm Garden Club that you don't need to go to that expense. So you can have your piece of paper and a jar of the size that you want to put your plant in. And what you do is you simply roll the paper around your jar so that it's like that. I've made this a little long. And then you crumple and fold up the paper on the bottom around the jar. And then, if you want, you can actually fold the top a bit to secure it. You're going to have to slide that out to do that. And there you have a perfect little pot to fill with potting soil, peat moss, your potting medium. Now you can do it in a variety of sizes, so you can go smaller. Something about this size works really well. But for me, one of the biggest pains is the teeny tiny little seeds that loathe to be transplanted. Okay, they don't like their roots disturbed, but they're so tiny that if you take them out in the garden and sow them, you're going to have a really hard time even finding where you put them. And poppies are a really great idea. So with poppies and small seeds, what I do that is, here we have a magic marker. So it's a pen. And again, a piece of paper, and you wrap it around and around, and then you twist the bottom up nice and tight. So you've got this lovely little tube. And that's really unmanageable. I mean, that's really hard to make stand up, or that. So you take something like this. This is my Jerseyland organic natural yogurt container, plug for a local all organic business. And I slide that in here amongst all the other ones that I cheated made before the show. So what you've got going on inside there is a whole lot of these tubes holding each other up. And it's easier to fill this with soil than you might think, because you just sprinkle and tap and sprinkle and tap and sprinkle and tap. Don't try and put it in each one of those individual little tubes. It'll find its way there. Just sprinkle and tap. And then you've got all these lovely little tubes. And so when you plant something and it's growing up, it's just a matter of sliding out a tube and just sliding a tube right out and sticking the plant right in the ground without its roots ever even knowing that it's been disturbed.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, so just a nice little, save yourself some money technique. Like I said before, I've seen all these gardening books on, how to be a lazy gardener, and I don't know any lazy gardeners, but every gardener that I know is some kind of cheapskate. They'll take that cutting because it's a free plant. They'll take their bag over to their friend's garden and snip a few little seed heads, because I'd like to grow that too. So I found that some of my best money saving tips have just come from like gardening clubs and hanging out with other gardeners who, regardless of their not all of them have Scottish blood, but regardless of their genetic heritage, it seems each and every one of them loves to save a dime. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, because it gives you more money to buy more bedding plants that you maybe
Yeah,
don't even
indeed.
need. Oh, those flowers are just so gorgeous. They look so nice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And where are we going to put them?
We don't
Somebody
know, but we're
pointed
going to get them anyway.
Yep. Somebody pointed out to me the other day that the biggest advantage of the online seed swaps and seed events is that she doesn't have money disappear out of her purse and the trunk fill up with plants that make her husband stand there and go, and where are we putting these ones?
Right.
so
Right.
so there is definitely that. Yeah. So okay, that time definitely still plenty of time to start things. I've been telling you to get the onions and those early ones going, but we're moving into March, and it's not going to be long before certain things can be planted out. Peas and radishes and spinach, and they can go in the ground as soon as you can be working it out there. And if you've gotten things like your pansies and onions good to go and ready to go, well, you can move them out too, which means now you've got room in the greenhouse to pot those eggplants, peppers, and tomatoes up to another size. And now you can start looking at planting things that take a little bit longer than say your very quick growing vine plants, but that don't take quite as long as your tomatoes. Cucumbers are a good one to start into when we're getting into March. They grow a little slower than squash, a little faster than tomatoes. So that's a good time to get them started. It's also an excellent time to get all of your brassicas started. So all of your cabbage, your cauliflower, your broccoli, your Brussels sprouts. I don't usually start kohlrabi in the early season because it grows quick enough out in the garden, and I kind of prefer my kohlrabi very very young and tender anyway. I find once it starts getting a bit of a thick skin on it, I just have to peel it off to enjoy it much
Mhm.
anyway. So I would rather start it out in the garden and plant it a couple of times, just plant a little bit at a time. But most of your brassicas really benefit from that head start. And the cool thing about brassicas is they can go out early. You can put them out pretty much as soon as you can work the ground, even if they're these little baby plants. They need warmth to germinate.
Mhm.
But once they are past that little baby two leaf stage, those things are hardy up to 8 degrees below Celsius.
Wow.
Yeah, and the cold actually makes them taste better. So you can be planting your brassicas out in April. They don't have to wait for the long May weekend.
So when you're figuring out your garden for the year, I mean, one of the things we do when we start gardening is we plant all our tomatoes at the same time or all of our cucumbers. And we have this glut of cucumbers or tomatoes all at the same time. So do you stagger your seedlings like every 14 days or 21 days or?
Not so much with my long season crops with like tomatoes and cucumbers, but what I do is within those species, I grow different varieties.
Variety. Okay,
So
yeah.
the tumbler and the lata are really early tomatoes. The tumbler is kind of a little bit larger than a cherry tomato, but it grows in a very compact form. It's great in a hanging basket. It's well named the tumbler. It just kicks out tomatoes starting in late June, early July, and keeps pumping them out all season. So and Lata is a really early tomato that's usually ripe in the Shuswap by early to mid July. So I'll grow some of those so that I have the early tomatoes. And then I have my sort of more production tomatoes that come on in the late summer and fall, you know, your ones that you're going to put up. So your paste tomatoes and that. And then I grow a couple, every year I grow out at least one of my long keeper species. I have about four.
Mm-hmm.
And these tomatoes often, even in the Shuswap, will not fully ripen in our season, but put in the root cellar, especially on the vine. So if you just cut the vine and
Yep.
hang the entire vine in the root cellar, they will often be ripe sometime between Halloween and Christmas. They'll be ripe, and in February I can still be eating them. Now they're not fabulous, but they're a lot better than what's in the store at that time of year. So, I get some, 80-day tomatoes, and I get
Yeah.
some 120 and 130-day tomatoes. But with all of those tender vegetables, because you see, when we eat a green bean out of the garden, it's a baby. The plant's plan for that bean is for it to get long and the shell to dry out and the bean to get hard and be what we would call a seed bean or a storage bean, But we found out that we like a lot of these vegetables when they're young and tender, like the cucumber, vastly underripe when we eat it compared to what it looks like when we, have a seed, when it's ready for seed development. So all of those tenderer things like beans, um, greens especially. I really laugh when I see people plant an entire row of lettuce in late May because in 6 weeks they're going to have like 43 heads of lettuce, and in 2 weeks later they're not going to have any at all. And so I really encourage successional planting, and where you take out one thing you can put in either more of the same or something slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
And some things I plant twice in the year, like peas are very, very cold hardy, and they can be planted the absolute minute that the ground is ready to be worked. And so I have a front flower bed that as soon as it thaws out, I put peas in it. The peas grow up. We're eating green peas, and way, way early. But as soon as those peas start to bloom, I know it's now warm enough for beans. So then I plant my runner beans in the same bed, and they grow up the side of the house and shade my deck and make it all very lovely. And in the heat, the peas start to die out. Well, along about mid August, when the nights are starting to cool off, the beans are slowing down because they're heat lovers. So at that point in time, I freshen up the bed a bit, get rid of anything that isn't looking good and healthy, and I plant peas, which means that they get a really nice growth in that warmth. They're not too hot, they're just right for growing. And then at the time when the beans are really done because we're into fall and they don't like the cool at all, well, now I have all these lovely fresh young peas. And so I've gotten three crops out of one little garden bed just simply by taking advantage of what temperature and things that those particular plants like. And the fact that peas and beans get along you know, like peas and carrots.
Okay. That sounds great. I like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Michael says, wow, gold. Yeah, that is gold. That is very, very wonderful the way that you described that. And I can see that already happening in our garden.
Yeah, yeah, you learn to work with the rhythm, and to go out and plant, a tiny little row of lettuces and green onions and radishes, and go out and pluck those few little lettuces, pull the green onions, pull the radishes, and replant that in something else. I mean, that's enough for a salad right there,
Right.
as summer comes on, and you can embellish that with a tomato here or there, or a cucumber here or there. Um, cucumbers are interesting because cucumbers are from a variety of vine families. And so some of them, although we call them cucumbers, are actually more closely related to melons. And so you can grow a couple of varieties right side by each and they won't cross pollinate.
Mm.
Like I have this beautiful long English cuke called the Armenian cucumber.
Mm.
It has such a pale, thin skin that it's virtually skinless,
Wow.
but it's actually a member of the cantaloupe family. And when you let it get overripe to gather the seeds and you're scooping out the seeds, you can smell cantaloupe. It is amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I can grow that cucumber right in the same bed with a pickling cucumber, and they're not going to cross pollinate. So learning, some of these little finer details can really, really ramp up the amount of production that you can get out of a small garden space.
Yeah, I always do my cucumbers in my greenhouse. So it seems they always seem to do better there. But I like the idea of having different types of cucumbers in the way that you mentioned because you don't want to plant the same variety, close, but to have different varieties. I can just see I can get more cucumbers per square foot by doing it the way that you're talking about with different varieties. And I think that's a great idea.
And cucumbers love to go up.
Yes.
Cucumbers don't need to take room on the ground.
No.
They can go up on a trellis, and so in a greenhouse they will take, less than a foot of actual soil space that and they can go right up. And this is a real boon. Um, I discovered a cucumber a couple of years ago that initially I dismissed. It was kind of, in my mind, a novelty cucumber. There's a lemon cucumber, a round yellow cucumber, slightly citrusy taste, really quite lovely. And shortly after it came out, there was this one that was slightly larger and almost completely colorless called Crystal Apple. And I tasted it and thought, well, it doesn't have much of a skin, and that's a benefit. It's very, very thin skinned. But I'm not really finding it a tasty, tasty cucumber either. But I grew it a couple of years ago, and I quite frankly have never seen a cucumber that prolific.
Mm.
I actually ended up leaving a good third of the crop on the bed because of rodent damage and think mold. I wasn't able to get to all of them. They're a bush cucumber, so they don't vine a lot. So everything's sort of right down around the base of them. But so prolific, they kept kicking out and kicking out and kicking out. And that's when I discovered that this incredibly crisp, no strong taste to it at all, and virtually skinless cucumber is probably the best relish and sliced
Mm.
pickle cucumber I have ever encountered. I like the little pickling cukes. I do
Yeah.
those type of pickles, but I'm a big bread and butter pickle fan, and I'm a big relish fan. I have 5 or 6. I do a lot of curries and spicy dishes, so I like to do a lot of like relish and
Hmm.
chutney kind of things. And I have to tell you, the amount of cucumbers that this plant kicked out alone was enough to make me fall in love with the production end of it. But when I saw how much it retains its texture and crispness through processing and how well it takes on flavors, I was like, wow. So I really take a look at the cucumber family, and if you like them, look at ways that you can actually increase the numbers of them that you grow by varying the species and keeping them from cross pollinating.
Wow, that's really interesting. And if you're like me, you're listening to the show, you're thinking, wow, my gosh, that's an awful lot of information. I'm in overload. But don't to worry, if you join the gardening circle, guess what? All of this information is going to be transcribed, all of what Sarah is showing, and it's going to go back to Sharon, Sarah, and she's going to make sure all of the wording is correct of all the little species and everything. So all this intricate detail will be available for you when you sign up for the Inner Garden Circle. So it's a lot of information. I know that you can't write as fast as you would like to get all these different varieties all down and in your notebook. So not to worry, you will be able to have the transcription available as part of the inner circle. I just thought I'd let everybody know.
Yeah, that is true. And also, on our seed packets, we have the actual Latin binomial for all of our seeds. It is really, really important when you find out that, when you look at the Latin names and realize that, your pole beans are Phaseola vulgaris and your bush beans are Phaseola vulgaris, but your running beans are Phaseola coccinesis, then you realize that you can grow a pole bean and runner bean right on the same branch and they're not going to cross pollinate at all. But if you plant your bush bean at the base of your runner bean, well, they're both Phaseola vulgaris and they're going to cross. So we're really, really careful to make sure that people have that kind of accurate information right on the seed packet because it's important. Now, we're going to be doing some stuff in the greenhouse coming up really, really quickly. And those of you that have greenhouses, we're not going to do greenhouse stuff today, but we're going to talk about like some of the greenhouse stuff you need to do. When you are looking at a greenhouse, you have to consider light, air, and moisture. Those are the really most important things. Now, heat's in there too, but heat is actually, you can have a heated greenhouse, and if it's not getting good light, you're not going to get good growth. And if you've got good light coming in and a little bit of backup heat, or winter greenhouses with no heat, you don't have to address heat issues nearly as much and as often as you have to address light issues.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. And what a lot of people don't know, Tyson, is that a greenhouse can have too much light. If
Yeah,
you,
certainly in the summer, I've seen people whitewash their roof, right, to slow down the amount of light coming in, right, because it's just too much.
yeah, or hang shade cloth,
Right.
and that. So you have to realize if you're going to build a greenhouse out of glass, old glass windows, that's a fabulous idea, but it's likely to let in too much light and too much heat and fry your plants. There's a product on the market that was specifically designed to let in maximum amount of light and heat waves without frying your plants, and it's the clear greenhouse grade coroplast.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like corrugated cardboard, it's semi opaque, makes wonderful greenhouses. But if you're building a greenhouse, check out, greenhouse plastics, check out some of the things for at least your roof. Or, if you're going to go to glass, you've got to also understand that, like Tyson said, you're either going to be whitewashing it out. I've also seen people use soap suds, just like a nice big um, benign kind of soap that makes a bit of suds, and you just smear it all over your windows and cut down the amount of sun. It washes off easier than
Yeah.
whitewash.
Yeah, whitewash is a pain.
Yeah,
If you try not to do that if you can.
yeah, whitewash is a bitch to get off of your grass, but but you're going to have to think in terms of controlling that light so that you don't burn your plants out completely. another major part of your greenhouse, and again, greenhouses can get too hot. So, airflow. Now, Tyson, you've got some unique stuff going on in your greenhouse with airflow, don't you?
Yeah, and it's still under construction. I've got a number of things going on. So one, it has from Lee Valley, it has automatic openers and shutters so that the airflow automatically, according to the temperature, opens and shuts the vents, which saves you a lot of running around and a lot of pain. And there's a certain amount of weight that that opener can handle. So you calculate the airflow in your greenhouse and how many of those openers and closers that you need to keep the ventilation moving. And so in my greenhouse, little one, we have three of those. Also, we have underground piping that comes in so that we can cap it off. They're about this big and it goes underneath the greenhouse, comes up in the floor. We can cap that off and control the ventilation that way. The other aspect is I have a cavity underneath the planting area in the greenhouse, and I haven't finished that, where the air comes in underneath the garden. It will then be vented up to the ceiling, right? So that when it heats up, there'll be airflow coming down underneath the garden. The warm air will be trapped. The cold air coming in will start this flow so that the warm air will take you longer into the evening and keep the greenhouse stable and warmer longer. And that part we haven't done yet. That requires a fan and a timer. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love this experimentation with making a greenhouse be as self-sufficient as it possibly can, because otherwise there's a lot of running around, opening and venting and doing
Yeah,
all that stuff.
yeah. Greenhouses are work, and that's kind of a very sort of passive geothermal technique that you're putting in there with the air exchange that way, and those kind of things are going to extend your growing season, and they're going to keep things really healthy in your greenhouse. And Tyson's right. If you don't have at least some automation going on in your greenhouse, you're going to be doing a lot of hands-on maintenance and interaction, opening it up, shutting it down, opening and shutting windows, checking moisture levels, because that kind of brings us to the third thing with greenhouses, and that is moisture control. And not greenhouses are by nature moist and wet, and that can become so problematic. A warm moist place is just an invitation for mold and mildew and insects, and all sorts of good things. And so if you with that high humidity and all that lovely light, if you don't keep a good airflow happening, you're going to end up in a situation where your greenhouse is growing stuff that you don't want and you can't eat. Take the time before you get into full blown greenhouse season to check everything out. If you've got a greenhouse, is everything working in it? Are the windows opening? Are the vents opening? Has the water can you set the water up? What can you get going and what can you check in advance? Because once you get, a few seed trays in there and you haven't done the proper troubleshooting, well, now you're not only having to fix the problem, you're probably going to be replacing plants too.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It takes a while to learn how to live with each individual greenhouse, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's a work in progress. I think the next step is we have Lee Valley automatic watering, and so the water comes now off of the roof. It's all rainwater. Have a rain barrel inside, so that it will, it's a heat sink to trap the and warms up, and it's a dark color. And we have other containers of water that are in the roof to maintain the temperature as well. But the
Yeah,
next
that
step
thermal
is
mass. Yeah.
yeah, air is the mass, the water mass. The next step is we have, a compost tea that we created. And from that, I want to make an automatic watering system that will go throughout the greenhouse. So if I go away camping for a few days, it's going to keep on watering. And of course, we have to be careful about that because some plants don't like to be watered on their leaves. So we're going to have to figure out how to do that at a low enough level that the plants don't get disturbed as well. So that's the next step. So yeah, it's for me the greenhouse is an ongoing, exciting project. It's never ending.
Yeah. Yeah, they so expand how much you can grow and produce and for how long you can have food. I um I can't encourage people enough to at least put in a small greenhouse. Some of the places that I've seen, it's phenomenally easy to do, like a partial underground passive solar. My friend in Armstrong put in a passive solar with single pane glass windows that they had kicking around the place. I think the entire 16 by 14 greenhouse cost them about $500 to build. And I know we had a phenomenal winter, but she was hitting temperatures of 33 and 35 in her greenhouse in January. And she was able to, she didn't have a single freeze event all winter long in her greenhouse. And aside from kale, she was able to grow at least 7 or 8 different vegetables throughout the winter for her family to eat. And
Wow, that's amazing.
yeah,
Yeah, I think I have probably the most expensive greenhouse on the planet, to be quite honest with you. But it's all an experiment and it's all fun. But yeah, if you are going to do a greenhouse, the thing I really encourage people to do is dig it into the ground. Use the heat of the underground part. The only thing that needs to come up is just enough for the snow. You don't want to be shoveling snow, so you want to know about how much your snow level will be. That's the level you want your bed to be. Otherwise, you're shoveling, and then after that, everything needs to be below in ground, right? So that's what I highly recommend. And don't forget in here that there's a magic 60-degree angle to catch the match on the sun.
yeah,
So you want to figure that out in your greenhouse. And the ventilation is really, really important. So those are the key things. But yeah, you can do it really inexpensively. No glass on the north. Make it into
yep,
a wall of rock. So there's a heat sink. Yeah.
yep.
I guess you can see that greenhouses are a big deal in my world. I just, I love the whole concept, right?
Yeah, well, they're really they expand so much you could what you can do, and we've kind of spent a couple of generations being enamored with the pristine and beautiful. So the lawn and the trimmed hedge and the neat row of flowers, but life's messy, and so are gardens, and but they feed us. And a greenhouse is it, it can be a very functional thing. It doesn't mean it has to be an unbecoming building. A greenhouse can be done very beautifully and really embellish the property. But keeping those things in mind, that if you actually put your greenhouse largely underground, you're going to be able to grow food year round, and it's going to be good, high quality food.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yep, important stuff.
Wow. Did we do it?
I think we did it.
All right. We're nearly close to the top of the hour. That was amazing. And don't forget, if you sign up for the inner garden circle, that you will have all the show notes as well and all the goodies. Like Sarah will be coming and doing some bedding, starting seeds and also doing some greenhouse work. All that video will be in the inner circle. So come and join us. The links are in the show notes of how to join us and garden with us. Make this your most productive year in your life, both financially, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. The garden can help you on all those different levels. Make your life full of green, green everywhere.
Yeah. Gardening's great therapy, and you get to eat salsa as well.
That's right. What could be better than that? All right, we're going to call this a wrap, and see you same time, same place next week for the next episode of How to Garden Like a Guru, how you can become the garden guru. Bye for now.
Bye.